Bonjour, it's me, JH. This week we will be talking about art history's biggest simp. He's awful, but he's made some pretty interesting works, and his entire set of work is almost entirely based on his own fears and traumas about this world that he was living in. And through his art, we can actually see and point out different iconographies that are quite interesting and pretty important for identifying the sort of like bad things that were happening during his time. This week, if you haven't guessed, we're talking about Edvard Munch, and he is a big misogynist, and I don't like talking about misogynists and being like, hey, your artist is bad, because often there are artists that are bad. I mean, just look at Gauguin. He existed in this world and was famous. Diego Rivera. Jesus. Not Jesus, actually. Jesus was pretty okay. So I've also realized from last week's video, and actually just all the other videos, I haven't really been keeping up with keeping the academics really strong in these videos. I do a lot of research, or actually I read like 2 essays and then I'm like, wow, that's good. Which is not a lot. I need to do more, but anyway, I do research for these videos, and I don't think that comes out very often because I'm so interested in the paintings aspect of it instead. So if you guys want, I will either do Twitter threads, or I will put them on a website, like as blog. Eventually I'll get to that, maybe by July. Probably by July. Hopefully by July. So let's get started. So we are going to replicate his style in acrylic paint because I don't own enough colors in oil paint, as we have all established by now. For this week, I wanted to replicate the atmospheric and theatrical lighting that Munch had in some of his paintings. So I wanted to actually capture it live, and then I realized that it was very hard to paint against the light, and it just... I am going to start out by figuring out my silhouette and then covering everything else with a blue tone black. So I can't do wood block printing this week because I don't have wood. A lot of his works were redone in woodcuts, and they showed either a different story or a progression of the man's thoughts. So maybe if we do like a number 5.1, it will be a woodcut, and we will not consider it as a part of the how you'll never do it. When I have the time, perhaps I will do something based on Munch's woodcut pieces, because they are quite interesting and very effective in what they're supposed to portray. The skin tone is a lot more yellow than my usual skin would be because of the lighting choice that I use, which you will see or have seen in the reference photo. I also wanted to use saturated colors as Munch would have in his famous paintings. The yellow tone of the skin will also make sure that the red hair isn't as loud and eccentric. I wasn't exactly liking how the portrait turned out, or even like the current effects, so... Yo, what the heck is that? What am I even doing anymore? Oh, bonjour, it's another day. This is very gross. He's so ugly. What are you? What are you? I had to take a break because my camera died, and because I was looking at this and I didn't want to Should I restart? No, I'm not gonna restart. So, the plan for today, hopefully we can finish this by today, is that I fix it. This thing is so incredibly ugly. I don't know how I got here, but this is what I have. So I must fix it. I'm using a reference photo for this piece, but the reference photo is kind of bad because I make regrettable decisions and I regret them immediately. I'm just putting paint on my palette, getting ready to suffer again. When I was starting to paint this piece, I didn't think that it would be very hard, but now I'm dying. So let's give it a whirl. When looking at Munch's works, I think a big part of it is his life experience as well as the trauma and his coping mechanisms that he used. I mentioned previously that he was art history's biggest simp, and here let me explain to you how he simped for a good 10, maybe more years. The first girl that I think Munch kind of simped for was Karen Bjorkstad, who is his aunt. That's great. I'm married, don't worry. I mean, yes, still worry. Who was allegedly an amateur painter, and for the rest of his life he had a weird complex with her and love from her, carrying her letters around and wherever he went, and also sending letters back to her whenever necessary. His family life wasn't very great. He lost his mother at a young age. He was the middle child of 5, and his father, after the mother's death, became very religious. So much so that he sort of became too stoic to even care about his children, losing one and almost losing Munch at about 13. By his early adulthood, he had joined a bohemian group from Oslo, which is the city he grew up in, and this group enjoyed polygamy as well as free love. However, he joined because they saw that one's artistic expression should come from within, for example, thought expressions and past experiences. Throughout his young adult life, he discovered sort of the companionship of women through his first girlfriend, who was a MILF and often sick. So that's the first person he was kind of simping for. And then he had some failed relationships with more independent women, which ultimately ended up having very bad consequences for him because he was very restrictive and very zealous as to women's rights. He didn't exactly think that women should be independent from their husbands, and his last proposal to a woman ended in him almost shooting her because she rejected him for a younger lover. And so his images after that point tended to include motifs of death, anger, fear, and desire. This is why I wanted to represent myself with red hair, because it was a sign of individualism as well as vampirism amongst females. Don't feel too upset for him, however, because in a lot of his self-portraits, he tended to have this superiority instead of being the victim of a temptress or a diseased woman. His images showed that he had a lot of pride. He put himself as a heroic character of the upper echelon, as well as having individual thought and being an intellectual. Finally, I added the element of the cigarette or smoking thing. I think it looks a little bit more like a blunt. I'm very sorry. But during this period of time, at the end of the century, Bohemian women often smoked as a sign of independence, as well as a sign that they were above the middle class. Although cigarette use was both associated with the lower class homeless population, it was also very popular with the upper class aristocrats. I often don't paint at night, and that's why this scene is a little weird, and it took me a little longer to realize that the hair was a little janky. So I finished the piece by coloring the hair a little more vibrantly and making sure that everything was well put together. The smoke, I think, came out pretty well. It's just a light mixture between acrylic and water, and then I scraped it around with a thin cotton towel. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that I've given you some inspiration to make your own inspired pieces. Have a good week, a good month, a good year. I hope you're happy. Like and subscribe and comment. And goodbye!